Okay, so we're gonna get going now. Ooh, that was a little bit loud, huh? All right. We're finally trying to figure out how to use these microphones at 12:50 in the afternoon. So here's my great plan I shared with you earlier, kind of. Is the way we're going to do this, we have an esteemed panel with us with a series of questions we're gonna ask them. But to kind of tie it all together, our plan is going to be to ask a question, have the panelists answer it, and then we're gonna kick that to the audience, right? So both two things, right? The question, but also any answers you have or any thoughts you have on that particular topic. And that way should end right about the time that we think. So we'll start with our panelist introductions, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Adam Eldert. I'm the Director of Public Safety for Fairfax County. I work in the IT department. I'm a little different than most technologists because I've got 20 years of being a first responder at the same time as being a technologist. So I've got most of my time is in wildland fire and structural firefighting. Did a little bit of law enforcement while I was in the Marine Corps. So I bring a little bit different observational stance when we talk about matters relating to technology and public safety.
And I'm Walt Kaplan with the City of Alexandria. I manage the IT for our 911 center, DEC. Much like was mentioned, I also have an operational background. I got you beat. I think I got 30 years now. And I'm happy to be here. You know, these guys are the 50-pound brains, and I'm just the eye can.
Good morning, or good afternoon. David Povlitz, Arlington County Fire Chief. 31 years in the fire service, but a little bit of a closet IT director. That was maybe the path not taken.
Hello, Charles Guddemi. I work for the district's Homeland Security and Emergency Management Agency, where I serve as the statewide interoperability coordinator. I've been in the position a little bit more than 8 years, and I came from federal law enforcement with the U.S. Park Police, serving for 25 and a half years.
Okay, thank you. So our first question, where are you currently seeing limitations in location data for field operations or at dispatch centers? And I think we said where, we'll say what, right, as well. So what and where are you seeing limitations relevant to location data?
Well, incredible demonstrations today. We've probably seen just leaps and bounds in terms of fidelity and accuracy of localization, but it's still not there yet. So we have to make sure we keep testing. We have to make sure we keep integrating, and we have to make sure we keep pushing the vendors and also the regulators and all of everyone in this public safety or communication space. I think we all see the use cases. We've heard the need for this and the mission alignment, but trying to put this all together to make sure it is reachable, operationalized, and can be procured. That's right now, I think we're all under challenging budget times, but this is mission critical. This is extremely important. And this touches many disciplines between law enforcement, fire, EMS, emergency communicators, emergency management. This is something fundamental we need to do in this, it's 2025. It's way past time.
Well, I'll just add one bit more, and that's, Jeff talked about it some and others have talked about it. I think it's time to really sit down, collaborate with the vendors, and make sure that we get some standardization across the board. I mean, I always point to P25, and I used to joke that it took 25 years to get in place, but I think it's been 35 now, and it still is saddled with proprietary, from the vendors. So I think this is the time that we, as the stakeholders, need to partner with the vendors and make this standard.
So for the group, any thoughts on that in terms of where or how we are seeing limitations in location data? And I'll follow that up real quick. Is anybody having success with indoor tracking today to like a 5/9 degree of reliability? All right, so we can put that to bed then, right? So nobody here in the room is having success to a degree that we can trust people's lives with in terms of indoor tracking. So what other limitations are we seeing, if any?
Not everybody wants.
Chief Burke, go back to the original what Frank from Alexandria said. When you said the stakeholders and work with the vendors. When you say that, is there kind of a call to action that we need, that these folks need, that we all need to have?
You know, I would leave that to each locality, but as far as I'm concerned, yes. We need to use there are some existing national groups. We really need to figure out how we can speak with one voice. And, you know, what we don't want to end up with is a system that it's proprietary, and you can't use it in one locality to the next.
How about any thoughts on GPS reliability, particularly as it kind of relates to either spoofing, interference, or other challenges of GPS? Anybody on the panel or audience members have thoughts on that?
Yeah, we have, in DC Fire, I can speak, we have daily challenges with GPS and unit tracking, right? So for AVLs and alerting units, we're in an urban setting, so, you know, GPS is important to us because routing of calls is only minutes between firehouses, not 20 minutes between firehouses, and if that's not accurate, it's not reliable, it's hard to use the data. Sure, a little bit off topic from what we're talking about with indoor stuff, but yeah, GPS is a challenge.
So it's interesting, I don't think it is off topic, I think it's perfectly aligned, right? So the limitations and challenges of GPS tie into the fact that we need some indoor location as well.
So I'm gonna take a completely different look at it. I've been doing the land mobile radio for the county for like about 16 years now. My biggest concern is timing of our radio system. And so if that timing goes out, guess what? Communications is negatively impacted significantly. So because we use GPS timing for our radio communications on our truck radio system, that's vital. So having some sort of resiliency or a backup solution that would allow for us to maintain that timing is vital. We do have some backup solutions, but they're only good for a period of time. Eventually, they will slip and the timing will go out. So it's not a right now problem, but it will be within weeks. So if we continuously have a problem for an extended period of time, that's going to negatively impact us.
Yeah, so we've been working with I think we work with Charlie as well, he can talk about it, but jamming has become a big issue for us. And if you lose GPS, I know we can run for a certain amount of time with our existing LMR, the same thing on the 4G, 5G side, but if you have simulcast, you're dead in the water the minute you have a GPS interference. And so what we're seeing is the broadband jammers don't just knock out our comms, it knocks out GPS, Wi-Fi, and all of the other technologies. It's one bundled switch. And we're starting to see that these things are so cheap that not only do these guys use it for committing a crime, they just leave it there to give them time to exfil while they're interfering with comms.
Yeah, you could actually buy that stuff on Amazon.
You can't. I've actually found 4 links, and I tell the FCC to knock it off. But it's all coming in from China, and we've been working with CBP and ICE to try to get it, but you know, you can't stop trade. And these things are often mislabeled as automotive or some other technology. So if anybody's interested in the work that we're doing on the jamming side, please come see me.
I would add that I think what keeps me up at night for GPS, right, is it is a single source of timing, configuration, sustainment, reliability, performance for so many systems, and so few of us actually understand A, how dependent we are on it, B, how it works, and C, what to do when it goes wrong. And so a nation-state level attack on position navigation and timing, especially GPS, the moment that starts to happen, the cascading consequences that we're trying to track down and understand, that's all overhead, right? That's all just spinning tires while we try to figure out what's going on. And that worries me. And I guess my question to the group, to you all, is there's time of day and there's timing. There are other timing standards if you keep that alive, 1588, others, like, why are those not taking hold?
I would suggest to that specific question, perhaps we're not the exact technologist to answer it. However, I do think that's part of why we're here today, right? To understand, and to your point, we probably don't understand how impactful that really is, right? When you start talking about air traffic control, positive train control, and GPS on highways, and the fact that our cell phone, a bunch of apps stop working. Like, there's all these things that are gonna occur. You won't be able to bank anymore because GPS went down, right? So, just as examples. Drew, do you have your hands up?
Yeah, just the question was really, where do we see like the gaps in GPS today, right? And one thing that stood out to me was that, there are solution providers today that are building into their solutions confidence variable for GPS. I mean, that in and of it tells you that it's a day-to-day issue of the accuracy of GPS. And then you talk about jamming and you talk about the security of GPS, right? So it's both an accuracy and a security issue. We're all in this room to talk about location tracking, and you bring up, speaking with one voice, right? It's what I see one of the biggest gaps is the FCC is focused on location right now in multiple different proceedings. Where is public safety's one voice in expressing your requirements that we're talking about today? Right? We saw it's a life-saving issue, but we're seeing a fragmented approach from public safety of advocating for this. There's a few folks that are, but where is the united voice, right? And you bring up that is a way to push not only vendors, it's a way to push policymakers too. So as we look at that, I think that's a critical piece that is my takeaway from here.
In that, bring that around, even where Ron brought up, it should be safe, common, mixer that leads that for public safety, and obviously falls under system. But that's a group that really needs to be pushing that, and that's where the stakeholders of public safety need to be going to those representatives and pushing that, because that's probably where you're gonna have the most traction to get this accomplished and know where to start.
The good thing too, I think that
It's the accent easier to hear.
we have to segregate the issues of voice comm and data. I mean, here we have perfect examples of data companies. They're not voice companies that are doing this. And so while we have the voice piece of what we traditionally think of communications, this is technology. It's a totally separate lane, totally separate group of people doing this. And especially when you get down to the hardware and field, things like that, where we're using the data, there's two paths there. And I agree with SafeCon's part of it, but there's a whole new breed of firefighters, police officers, and emergency management people that are technology bound. The communications is just the side piece. This is bigger. This is the main pipe. This is the things to do. Voice is just one of the things, between that whole big pipe of data.
Agreed. I took a class about meeting facilitation, and you're supposed to say neutral, and I find it virtually impossible in this setting, because you're absolutely right though, Jeff, right? Like, the standard of care in our industry is going to change. It's going to change rapidly, and our younger and newer firefighters and police officers, they're going to expect that we know where they are and what radio channel they're on, and what their SCBA is telling them, or what their firearm is doing, or what their body cam says. And when that changes over quick, we're going to be obligated to provide them, that level of safety and that level of information. So anything else on that question? Because Drew brought us into the next one, which is trust and validation. So moving on, for the panelists first, what thoughts do you have relevant to data validation, particularly around location services? So in other words, how do we know that the information's good, are using standards today, or is there anything we should be looking at in the future? And I guess to kind of build that out further, like, how do we ensure that the information we're getting is going to be accurate? What were the processes or steps behind that?
I'll start off.
Well done.
I can start off and then pass it down, because I'm sure Chief Povlitz has something to say about this. I think for us in Fairfax County, our big concern is, because we have such a very broad-ranging type of environment, from residential to high rises and things like that. So the data validation for us is obviously making sure dispatch information, when it comes in, provides an appropriate and accurate dispatchable location for personnel and tactical equipment, right? And then we gotta make sure that that information gets to the responders get on scene, and then they get to a physical location of where that person is. All that stuff is important. I mean, if you get dispatched, you think the caller is in one location, the caller may not know where they're at, right? And so they may be visiting, they may just not be familiar with the area, and they don't have information to give. And that information trickles down, and eventually the responders show up not in the appropriate location because they didn't get in the first place. So our big thing is testing, making sure that whatever solutions are presented to us bear muster. Public safety has way more scrutiny against new solutions and whiz-bang stuff than general IT people do. General IT people will be like, oh, that's pretty cool, we can do that. But they don't look at the fact that we look at it from a life safety critical nature of things. It has to be 5 nines. There has to be redundancies built into it. It has to be highly available, highly reliable, and it needs not be too complicated, right? It needs to just work and work every time. So for us, those are the measures that we use when vendors come to us with this stuff. Very much like Jeff and his team did in Arlington, where they put it through the paces. And we don't take anybody's word for anything because, frankly, we're in the business of, well, I am in the business of making sure that responders have the right tools in their hands when they go out to save lives. Right? That's my job, is to make sure they have the right tools and they work all the time. So from their perspective, they just want it to work. I don't know how many times that we've implemented new things on the radio system or things like related to that, and it's like, does it work? They don't care about all the shiny stuff and like, oh, this is really cool. They say, does it work? Does it work every time? That's it. And how much training are my people gonna need to be able to use this stuff? Is it like 15 minutes or is it 15 hours? All that's important. And is it relatable? So that's my part. I'm sure you guys have stuff to say.
The only thing I'll add is, sometimes I wonder if we're letting perfect be the enemy of good. At some point, we just got to start getting the data out there, get it validated, and start using it. Probably the second most important thing in a 911 center after voice is location. And as of right now, our location is lacking.
Both very good points. I'll build on that. Context is everything. And what we have now, high confidence in we can deploy it in pilots and keep testing and keep seeing if we can operationalize it. Is it 100%, 5 nines? No, it's not there yet, but it's getting there. But it also gives something that we just never had. And even if there's a partial signal, if we have a partial data stream that we have high confidence in accuracy, that's telling us something. If something catastrophic happens, if something happens where we have to evacuate responders, evacuate the building, and we just have a partial signal, that's good enough data to make some decisions which really may affect the safety of the occupants and the responders. So we'll get there. We're not there at the point where we can deploy location-based services in an integrated enterprise system yet, but it's coming, and it's a matter of a few years off. Let's keep pushing it and doing everything we can to partner. But there's one thing, and this is probably the boring or the cuss word part, we can sort of control our own destiny to a degree. All this is predicated on good networks. This is something we can push our communities, push our legislators, push our regulators to see if we can deploy something better, get these networks in these structures. If we're running anywhere in our neighborhoods or jurisdictions, 15 to 25% commercial vacancy rates right about now the economics are starting to come in, whether we're either dropping them down and redeveloping or renovating. That's the time to see if we can get these networks in these smart buildings, in these smart campuses, and build out these smart communities. That's going to fill in some of the navigation gaps and the satellite gaps. That's going to give us more data flow, and it's as a critical building system as the plumbing, as the electric system is, and this is what should be instituted in the building codes, fire codes, and all the permitting process. And who pays for it? That's been a kind of a question. Who pays for a lot of this? Well, it has to be a little bit of what's reachable and attainable on the development side, but also borne by the jurisdictions, us government to some degree. So I think we're still navigating it, and there's some really good efforts locally, Fairfax County, Arlington, there's some, and even on the state levels and consensus codes, we're trying to see if we can get these digital networks, land mobile radio and LTEs into the structures to help build it out. We're gonna have to bring our ad hoc networks on the residential. This is the things we just can't mandate or legislate through. But as we build out, as our communities develop, expand, and change, this is an opportunity we can go, and it's gonna take many years, but let's start today and say, hey, we need this written into code, and it should not be a should, it needs to be a shall.
Chief, I just want to add, I think when you're talking about validating data, the piece that sometimes gets left out is the feedback from the first responder. And oftentimes as the SWIC, I'll find out issues with cell phones or with radios, and it's not timely. They'll come to me months after an event, and then they'll tell me my phone or my radio sucks. And I'll be like, okay, I need a little more because I can't fix suck, right? I mean, what was the event? What was the date, the time? What were you doing? Were you on a call? Were you texting? Were you uploading, downloading? And we work hard on that to try to get that information, because that's only we could go back to the radio system managers with the data, and certainly the cellular industry, because their data gets overridden in their global networks. So that's a big part of it, is measuring the performance, but we need the feedback from the first responders, and it has to be timely in order to validate the information and the systems that we have in place.
Great. So, for the audience, any thoughts on data validation, trustworthiness?
For, at least from the first responder perspective, we're action-oriented, right? So we're getting the data from the PSAPs, if you will, and we're responding to it, right? We're going there and we're doing the thing. You know, recently there's been incidents where we've acted on somewhat 3 words locations, but the person who called was using the guy next to his phone, so it's not really accurate, right? We responded there, and then when we finally got the call back, that guy jumped on a metro and ended up in Cleveland Park. Do I now send another assignment to Cleveland Park because we're acting on new data? Those are the things that I think for us in our operational stance, this is all coming in real time. It's questioning our incident responders, our battalion chiefs that are responding. They're seeing it hit the MDT faster than they can even read. Some of them are probably crashing on the way, but like it's coming, and they're like, well, I see this note. They're asking communications. Is this accurate? Communications got to do a callback. The guy didn't answer his phone because he was in the metro. All of that stuff is like split-second real action stuff. So the validity of the data is things that we have to almost really triage before we give it a confirmation, if that makes sense, right? You really gotta make sure that we're checking a validation box to say that it's accurate, right? Because the technology company's taking it, sucking it in, spitting it right back out. But did it stop in the middle to really get the true triage it needed to send the first responders there? That's going to be a challenge, I think.
I think those are great points. Anybody have anything to build off of that before I do? I guess that's a benefit of being the moderator, right? So excellent points, right? So again, I could probably talk about this all day and I won't. But some things on that, like what other systems can we use to provide validation, right? What algorithms or other kind of thought processes can we use to make sure the information is accurate, right? So I have like a silly hobby, to Chief Povlitz's point about predictive analytics, right? Like I'm convinced that there's a bunch of stuff we could know, we just don't put the effort into figuring it out. And that's exactly your point, because the responders really need to only get the information critical to them at that moment in time and nothing extraneous. Otherwise, we're into like a cognitive overloading standpoint. We can't operate. And we've all, I think, everybody that's responsive in that situation has seen where there's too much coming your way to really act effectively. And you realize it afterwards, right? Like, why did I miss that point? Well, it's because I had 4 other points at the same time, and the one that probably mattered went away. So part of these systems need to strip out the unnecessary and focus on the critical. So, excellent. Other thoughts on that before we move on? Okay, so, and this actually is another great segue, right? So what policy, training, or funding changes are necessary to accelerate adoption? So I think we know there's a wide variety of regulatory agencies and other kind of tricky aspects, especially money, which Chief Povlitz mentioned. So the panelists, any thoughts on policy, training, or funding?
I'll start off with funding challenges, and then I'll throw the hot potato over to the chief. I don't think it's any secret here in the National Capital region, our UASI grant got cut by 90%. So a lot of our programs, we've been on that grant nipple for a long time, and we thought we'd gradually move off it, but it became abruptly, and we have to figure out what we need to do. So funding is going to be a challenge, not only today, but for the foreseeable future. So.
That was safe, politically correct, and the right thing to say. I'm going to try to stay in bounds on this one. We need help, and yes, a lot of the things that we've been working on for many, many years, if not decades, needed to be moved to local funding sources. We're trying to coordinate that train wreck. But we need additional funding to see if we can regionalize the new novel things to anti-UAV UAS, compromising the GIS or GPS systems, implementing localization. All of this, we need additional help to do it in the city centers, in the metropolitan regions, and then keep on expanding and scaling it. In the meantime, until that comes, and there's a lot of advocacy on many, many fronts, then there'll be some money flowing at some point in time. In the meantime, we can work on the standards side. We can make sure we are coordinated, make sure we're not doing something disparate that can definitely be scaled up in larger arenas. So, yeah, money, more.
What I'll add is, it's interesting, if you look at this region since 1982 and even a little before, there's been a lot of work done on interoperability. Where we fall down is quite simply on the locality level. We need to cooperate with all and collaborate with all the localities and stop buying disparate systems. Start buying systems that are in alignment. I'm not saying you have to buy the exact same thing, but hold the vendors accountable. And I look at our radio system, and we have a phenomenal radio system in this region. Absolutely phenomenal. But we also have a master at every locality. That's crazy. That's millions and millions of dollars. And we gotta start looking, especially with funding the way it is now, we gotta start looking at how we can economize and still get this stuff done. And I think that's gonna be through collaboration.
All excellent points. I think one of the other things is, and being a technologist and technology moving almost at breakneck speeds in all different areas, one of the things that we get challenged with is procurement and the policies and regulations that govern buying technology, whether it's contracts. I'll say right now, I'm in the middle of finalizing a contract that I've done, it's been working on for over a year. And it's finally with lawyers and purchasing and the vendor and all that stuff. It's over a year. Fortunately, we already have, this is a maintenance contract, but if I was trying to buy something new that was going to make a difference, guess what? Same thing, same rules apply. Got to go through attorneys, got to go through purchasing, got to make sure all the I's are dotted, T's are crossed. And that's on top of making sure we have the funding for it. So to implement any sort of real change, it'll take years to try and get through all the wickets, make sure we get everything done. And by that time, technology's changed again. So whether it's trying to find a vehicle, if you're negotiating directly with the vendor, or you have a conglomerate you're able to work through, that's even better. Point being, though, is that it's challenging. And then when we go talk about regional initiatives where we're trying to work on whether it's CAD to CAD, which is one of the programs I oversee from a regional perspective, it gets pretty daunting when you're dealing with multiple vendors, multiple solutions, but we're still working off a single standard, getting everybody to sing the same song. And so, the Chief's point and Charlie's point, everything costs money, and it's not getting cheaper. People can say, oh, well, car prices are coming down. I've yet to see a price go down since I've been in the industry. Every year it goes up, regardless of the economic situation, whether local or federal, whatever. So those are some of the things that we find when we're trying to implement great new solutions that can make a difference. And the policy's there to protect us too, right? So it's we have to give a little to get a little, but sometimes it just takes a long, long time.
Great, thank you. So for the audience, any thoughts on policy, training, or funding challenges or changes? Hey, Jeff.
So I want to turn around and look at our vendor partners, because really all those things start right there. They have to come to us with solutions out of the box. They know our challenges. They've heard what you're saying. They got to go back now, sharpen their pencils, figure figure out how to do collaboration, whether it's buying fire trucks and saying, okay, we have 2 models of fire trucks, that's all we're gonna offer. We're not gonna offer 87 different opportunities to change that one truck. Here's your 2 options if you wanna do it. And then looking at us and saying, hey, this one model will fit here for this national capital region. This one might fit the rural situation, but our vendors have to help us go through this. As we change the amount of dollars available, regionalization has to take place. Everybody's fires ain't no different, okay? They're all the same. You may have subways underground, somebody may have them above ground, that may be a slight challenge. But again, we, as part of that, have to work with our vendors to come up with these solutions. We can't do it by ourselves. So if we can want all we want, if they won't build it the way we want it, we ain't gonna get it.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, so we're gonna say that again in English? Sir?
Yeah, so, thank you for getting on your soapbox, so I didn't have to get on mine. Interoperability, I'm the P25 CAP manager, so I force all these vendors to go test and put them on the S&D's website. We're doing the same thing we did with P25, we're doing it in broadband. Not all apps, push-to-talk apps are created equal. We're having the same interoperability challenges, and what you said really resonates. And I want to foot stomp what you just said, which is talk to your neighbors, ensure your interoperability partners are compatible with you. Because otherwise, we're going to have a really bad day one day soon. And I can't stress it enough. I've been fighting on this for a long time. Do standards, do open source as much as possible. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yes, ma'am.
Vendors in collaboration, I'll hit on both of those. So the first responder network authority is partnered with the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, and we are validating the accuracy of indoor location tracking systems in our lab in Boulder, Colorado. And I know Dave, Charlie, and Adam, you were out there in March of this year to take a look at that. I'd invite anybody who is interested, come talk to me, and I can give you the details of the lab, and perhaps invite you out for a tour out there and you can see what we're doing. For industry and academia, we would love to have them come to our lab and actually take part in that validation process. Because again, along with what DHS is doing, we're doing that on the first side. Yeah, absolutely.
Other thoughts? Before I yammer for a couple seconds, because I got a couple, of course. So I think there's a distinction here that's happened probably in the last 5 to 10 years. One is the change cycle, right? So anybody ever take a systems thinking class or read the 5th discipline book about that? All right, so one of the sayings is systems are perfectly designed to get the result you're getting, right? So whether you want that result or not, the system produces it. So one of the things we know in public safety is it takes time to get from idea to execution. In this instance, right, we know our change cycle is like 3 years, right? So I remember like how does a bill become a law when you were a kid, right? And the NFPA revision cycle is 3 years. So our window to get stuff accomplished, arguably from most settings, is 3 years. But from what Patrick started 2.5, 3 years ago to where you're at now are vastly different, I would argue.
2017.
Fair enough.
But we were doing hardware at the time for the software for ECI.
Fair, perfect, right? So, and the other thing is too, and you mentioned like the position, navigation, and timing alternatives to GPS, you might as well have been speaking like a different language, right? So the other thing that happened, like the world's way more complex, right? So when the NFPA started in the 1800s, and we were arguing about hose thread, like you and I could have had that conversation and figured it out. Most lay people can't have that conversation any longer. So the complexity is far, far greater than usual, or previously. So all that to be said, between those two things, I think the answer is we really need the vendors and manufacturers to work closer together to benefit the end user. If we're relying on the NFPA or other regulatory processes to get to the end result, it's not going to work. And honestly, we're losing time and losing lives. So, other thoughts on that question before we move on? Thanks for giving me that soapbox.
Chief.
Oh, yeah, sir, please.
So, as far as getting the manufacturers together, that would be great if there was an industry trade group or something like this. But is this something that the I-Chiefs or the IAFF could get behind and become that central point to bring the voices together so that we can present our requirements to the vendors in one voice and not in, 30,000 fire departments across the country? So use the trade organizations that are already out there.
Yes, good point, and I think it's been growing over the last 2 or 3 years. I know the International Association of Fire Chiefs has a technology symposium that's coming up in 2 or 3 weeks in the first part of December, and the emergency communicators, emergency managers, and the International Association of Chiefs of Police. We're seeing a change in what used to be the vendor space. It used to be floor space, fire apparatus, fire equipment, boats, you name it. Now it's like 50% technology. So there is participation, there is coordination, but I think we just probably needed a little bit more focus and a little bit more interaction on these specific technological solutions.
Great, Chief, thank you, completely agreed. And I think I just add one addition to that, which is also labor, right? So the people going to benefit from this are likely police officers, patrol officers, SWAT operators, firefighters, hazmat technicians, and using labor of their associations to combine into that, I think would be great, right? So I think you're right, end users pushing that would be a great step forward. Other thoughts? All right, and again, that nicely goes into our next question, which is, how could they better collaborate to shorten the path from pilot to practice? So one thing we talked about is, just engaging associations, but are there other thoughts on how industry, organizations, and agencies can collaborate better? Panels?
Well, I'll start on that one. It's really always been fascinating to me because we have all these entities that are out there, but they operate in silos. The police chiefs don't necessarily communicate with the fire chiefs. And that's just the nature of this business. But we have to figure out how to overcome that. And I really believe this. We're working with Arlington. Alexandria is looking to work with Arlington to really start aligning some of our procurements and see if we can't, avoid the pitfalls that we've been in for the past 20, 30 years of buying all these disparate systems. So while I don't think we can rely on the organizations, I do think we can work with them and pressure them to represent us, again, with one voice.
I think throughout my career, my doorbell's always ringing, and it's usually somebody with a solution looking for a problem, and how do we avoid that scenario type of thing. And oftentimes I tell them they want to bring me to their lab to show me how their technology works. I'm like, I'm not wasting my time. You come to my lab. I happen to have the biggest lab probably in the world, and that's the National Mall, right? So, and I could offer, what do you want, a one-person event, a 100-person event, a 10,000, a 500,000? I have a Chinese menu of opportunities for testing technology in the real-world application and during different environmental factors, all the stuff that really matters. So even with the vendors in the room, when we talked about the 4th of July, that was my third pilot of the day. We were doing a 2024 video stress test, measuring the video performance of the 3 major carriers on their commercial networks and their public safety offerings. Also, we worked with DHS CISA. We were testing WPS in real time when cellular congestion was reaching its peak. And then with Jeff and Ed, they came to me in the spring, hey, this is what we did in Arlington. I was fascinated with it, and I offered, I said, hey, why don't you come to the 4th of July? I want to see how it operates when we start losing cellular connectivity because of the mass gathering. And I want to do it subterranean and in building. And I said, I've got the perfect building. And I knew the Washington Monument. So it's not that I have a Star Trek transporter in there that everybody's XY went into the Potomac River, because that's where I was for a while when I was, about 30 feet off the ground. It didn't change until we got to the upper half and we started getting to the window that we saw the technology. But I think that's an invaluable experience for us, the consumer, but also for the developer, because that is countless man hours or lab hours they don't have to waste because they're interacting with the first responders in their environment. So it's that private-public partnership that is critical to cut down that time and make it meaningful for everyone.
If I could add to that a little bit. I love what you said. You said, let's not let perfect be the enemy of good. Because that's exactly right. We can't improve our system. I can't make it better and make my algorithms more resilient to the jump window if I don't experience this building, if I don't experience the Washington Monument. We need that data set, so I actually need you guys using it, and it's going to get better at time. But one thing I can promise, today is the worst it will ever be. Tomorrow it will be better. The next day it will be better. But if you don't start using it until 2 years from now, that's the worst day it'll ever be. It's always just going to keep pushing it up. We need people using it so we can start improving it. So that was my support.
Okay, other thoughts on how industry and agencies, organizations can collaborate better? Sir?
Just a note that, and tags along with that, we need to understand where that line is between good enough. Like, we understand, we all want perfection, we're all aiming for perfection, and ultimately, perfection is really not gonna happen. We gotta bridge that gap on the manufacturer side of how do you define what's good enough? If we put 10 of you in a room and ask yes no questions, we get 4,000 responses, right? So through that lens, help us to fine tune how we, and like we said, we have the ASAP, right? The testing is pretty clear on what is pass, what is fail, and what's acceptable. We deal a lot in the variation of, okay, it's gotta be like this, plus or minus a certain percentage, right? The more we can hone in on that, the better that we can come to you in those field environments and say, okay, give this a test run.
I don't disagree, but I also think, this is something that, I deal with on a regular basis. It's back to not letting perfect be the enemy of good. Because right now I don't have Z access. And even if it was not completely accurate, which phase 1 and 2 are not completely accurate, it's better than what I have today. So I want Z access now, and I'm willing to wait, knowing that the confidence in this data is whatever it is, whatever the percentage is. But knowing that it will, as you said, it's only gonna improve every day. So, I think right now we're missing a lot of tools that we could be using because we're waiting for that perfection.
All right, so moving on from then, what would the holy grail of situational awareness look like in 5 or 10 years? So if you had like the perfect end result, you pulled up to an event where shots are fired or firefighters are missing or civilians are missing, what does that look like? So I guess panelists first, and then we can kick it to the audience.
So the one thing I always worry about is information overload for the responders in the field. And I mean, you can send all kinds of stuff all day long. I mean, we have a real-time crime center that just ingests so much data from so many different sources, and you need like a half a dozen people to read through it because it's real time. Well, what about that, brand new cop just off FTO riding by himself or herself, or that, brand new unit officer in the fire department finally able to run the rig. And now they got, they're first on scene, they're the incident commander until somebody else shows up. But you're busy trying to deal with the stuff right in front of you, but then, to your point, when you have all these different messages coming through. I remember running battalion, and I would be running down the road, I'm listening to the radio, trying to hear what units are marking up, and then all of a sudden, I get these updates from dispatch, and I'm trying to not crash, because I don't have an aide to drive me, right? So what is too much? And where should that information live? Who should get that information to make it actionable for the people in the field to be able to do the job, just like the chief talked about, making sure that you have actionable information to do the job at hand and not be overwhelmed with so much data. In my perfect world is that there would be a delineation. Somebody that gets all that data that can, either through use of AI, or other different means, to be able to parse through it, find the important stuff to get it to the people in the field, and as automated as possible, as quickly as possible, so that those decisions can be made with a high degree of certainty, and also with that degree of accuracy for life-saving activities. Whether it's a barricaded suspect, whether it is somebody who's suffering a heart attack in a large gathering, or something else, right? So that would be my perfect world, not so much stuff to the person in the field to overwhelm them, but enough data so they can make really good decisions.
I think in terms of the Holy Grail, the timing is pretty good. I think most people know I produce an annual interoperability summit, and 2 weeks from now, December 3rd and 4th, we'll be highlighting the 30-year anniversary of the Oklahoma City bombing. And in my research for that, one scenario present in there, after the explosion, there was a tremendous response, to try to see if there was any survivors in the recovery phase. But one of the office spaces inside the federal building was ATF, and some of their training devices were blown into the debris. So one of the responders discovered one of the devices, and they thought it was a secondary device, which created this panic of evacuation, and everybody hightailed it out of there. And so now you think if you're incident command, a unified command, you have all of these responders out there that probably didn't go to the staging area, that just self-dispatched to the location just to try to help. And wouldn't it be great if upon check-in, whatever mechanism you decided, probably the easiest way to use a regional radio system that had all subscriber units on it, so that'd be one way to monitor all the mutual aid coming in there. But after that panic, right, could I find out where all my people were, that self-evacuated type of thing? So I kind of use that scenario because 30 years later, I don't think we're in any better position to address that, to find those resources for that type of scenario. So, and also similarly, if we take the Navy Yard shooting, and we look at that, 117 officers from 8 jurisdictions took 69 minutes to neutralize the shooter in a 50,000 square foot building that was built to keep RF out, right? It was a huge skiff. So the challenges of the Navy Yard, and then while they were evacuating because of the sounds of gunshots, somebody pulled the fire alarm. So every time a first responder keyed the mic, all you heard was the blaring of the fire alarm, which almost rendered the radio system useless at that point in time. So that situational awareness, to be able to monitor where all your resources are, is only going to prove critical. If I'm an incident commander, operations chief, unified command, I want to know where the assets are and be able to direct them, and also make sure. The one thing is, we talk about it all the time, you start your tour and everybody should end their tour going home, and it's all about responsibility to ensure that happens.
5-10 years out, gold ring, it's the spatial data, that location, highly trusted, accurate, precise, location-based services can flow. Here's the groan. We're fumbling around with artificial intelligence now, but in 5 or 10 years, we need the augmentation. We need the automation. That's to reduce risk in the community and also to reduce risk to first responders. We have staffing issues. The technology is not a substitute for our public safety line of work, but it is an enhancement. We need to use these technologies to make sure we are handling an additional or anticipated increase in emergency services calls as the years go on. So if we can reduce the risk to the public, if we can make sure we have good location-based service or location-based state for drone as a first responder, getting that situational intelligence, get the pipeline rolling right after 911 call, and then carry it through for a response, law enforcement and also fire. If we can automate and reduce the risk and get recon, get intel, do anything we can from these either autonomous aerial, marine, or terrestrial systems, I will destroy a $100,000 automated robot versus injure a firefighter every day of the week. We need human in the loop. We're not going to take our hands off the wheel, but these technologies can make sure we extend careers and also get there fast, get there reliable, and handle and mitigate the emergencies. And then, what we're doing now, testing, we're building and getting the data so we can train these systems next year, the year after that, and the year after that. That's why we have to keep pushing, pilot, test, and deploy here and now and today.
Thanks, Chief. Any other panels? Good. How about from the audience? So holy grail on what this could look like in 5 years. Does anybody have any ideas we haven't discussed yet that would perhaps lend themselves to situational awareness, location, or other types of things? How about like thermal imaging cameras, interaction with the cat is what I was looking for. Any other thoughts? Yeah? Oh, sure. You, sir.
I have a GIS background. There's a lot of automation you can do, such as what is the closest exit that could be fed to the person. It doesn't have to be someone in a command center saying, take a left, take a right. It could be something that's automated, AI perhaps to do that. But there's operations you could do right now. I think a lot of information has to flow to the responder too, rather than just being filtered by somebody else. If they have the options to see something in bad environments, perhaps kind of lenses or something like that.
Matt Miller, he's implementing a regional solution for, we're branded right now responder, but he's building the National Capital Region GIS service to start processing this information, BYOD, but we're gonna see if we can start testing in that from a variety of other services and devices and see how we can visualize, operationalize. But what you said, the flow back, and it goes back to user experience. I'm gonna go home in about 1 or 2 hours, and within 5 minutes, I'm gonna probably look at what looks like the next generation of our workforce. It is it's my 25-year-old son. It's unbelievable what they can do and how they process, but they're coming from how they socialize, how they learn, how they engage. It's gamification. It's incredible how they process in terms of video games or socializing. They are in this digital space. They're gonna be our supervisors in 10 years. They're gonna be our managers in 20. So I think we kind of have to meet them in the middle. If they were to walk into our workforces now, it's like turning a light switch off. They're going dark. But how they consume and how they process, it is amazing what they can do with the right contextual feedback and the right interface and how they can interact in the emergency communication space and law enforcement space and also in the first responder space. So that's of the priorities, that's in the lower part of the stack, but that's who's going to be taking care of us in 5 or 20 years.
I want to agree with the chief on the Utes, for sure. They're much more advanced than we are. But don't forget the folks that are out there now. Just some of the demos today, there's so much stuff on the screen that the average volunteer fire chief or deputy sheriff in a rural area is driving themselves to get to the call. They don't have the time. Someone said earlier, they got somebody knocking on the window. They got other companies that are coming in. So just to keep it simple in a way that old men can operate, but still have an appeal to the youths as they come up through.
So about 4 years ago, the FRRG that I sit on, we came up with what we called then the virtual command assistant. And it was literally looking at what AI could do back then, not imagine what we're doing today. And literally all those radio traffic, people moving, tracking them where they were going, it all performed for you, and you could just be deaf and blind, and it would do it for you. And then when you had a critical incident, a mayday, somebody said, we need something, it would then pop up that information that you need. So taking all that noise away from the decision maker until he needs to make it, or her needs to make a decision about it, is one of the goals we should really be striving for.
So, there's a lot of talk today about using GPS and GPS-assisted networks, either cellular systems or other timing systems. But there's also other localization technologies out there, and one thing, and maybe this should be directed more at the military, that might be useful, at least on the fire side of things, is near field location. Maybe you don't care where exactly they are in the building if you know they're 10 feet from another firefighter. So being able to use other tools to localize and come up with the same solution without having to process through maps and that kind of thing. So you get EA activation, and the people closest to you get some sort of alerts in their HUD saying, hey, there's a EA activation near you and it's in this direction. So maybe looking at this in using different technologies to solve the same problem.
I'd like to respond to that, and I agree, but I also think that every single different device that we got to drag onto an incident is one more thing that can go wrong. And my thing is the KISS method, keep it simple, stupid. Learned that way back when I was a 19-year-old private in the Marine Corps. Keep it simple. So sometimes the simplest way is the best way. I think we need to look for lowest common denominators, not having to, and then the other thing is that you're not spending a whole bunch of extra money on other things that you may be consumable that you need to replace or maintain or forget to maintain. I don't know how many times I've been to the firehouse and we're on an incident and you're supposed to check your gear out, but the batteries in their HUD sensor were dead. So they didn't know how much air they had until their bell was ringing. It's just one of those things there, if we can keep it simpler, and still deliver that information, that would make things way better. And then that's where the vendors come in, the manufacturers. I think, sorry, question. Oh.
Here's a section on that. So to show you one, I'll take a page out of Chestnut. One thing that we're working on right now, and to touch on what you both were just saying, we're training an AI model that it will ingest all your SOBs, and it will listen to your radio chatter in real time, and it will just pull them up. So it's less information you have to go over. It's there if you want it, and it's like, you know how we have the different tiles. It's just one of the tiles. And it's just pulling up the SOPs as it's hearing the radio chatter. It's actively just searching and pulling them up for you. Let's say it's at Tesla fire. I don't know, how I'm supposed to approach it or whatnot. I just look right there, okay, Tesla fire is supposed to come at 45-degree angle, blah, blah, blah. If it's an ammonia spill, how far away evacuate? Well, just look right there, oh, it's, a model, whatever. So it's already doing it for you, so instead of looking at your boat, less time, less self, but it's just leveraging technology. So we're actively doing that today, and actually started beat beta in that probably Q1.
I think the greatest takeaway that you can have is a difference between strategy and tactics. We're sitting here talking about solutions to specific problems, which are important, and that's where the vendors for technology comes in. But as a fire service, a communication professionals, those type of organizations, I think they got to set the tone on what the overall strategy is going to be. Identifying what is our top tier. Is it precise identification with 3 axes? You tell me, but we have to come up with what the actual long-term strategy is. And then as the one voice that you measure, the organizations advocating to NPIA, to federal communications, regional compacts, et cetera, that everybody's trying to row in the right direction. Because right now, it almost reminds me of you're doing things with apparatus purchase. This jurisdiction needs this specific widget, and the other jurisdiction nearby says, no, I don't need that. And we create all these competing things instead of recognizing we have a resource problem. We have an issue that the pot's only so big, and if we're not all singing in the same direction, and you've got a couple of organizations going off on a tangent, it really creates a problem. And that's something that I think the fire and law enforcement communities ought to be the ones driving it, and we ought to be trying to bring along government and the vendors and the technology to actually meet our needs, not being pulled with our need on here.
Sir?
I see. We covered a hell of a lot of ground since panels. Thank you all for it. I think there's one out that Patrick just mentioned now, and that's AI. AI is going to completely revolutionize the way that the vendor community is approaching technology and the way that they're going to present ADCs across the country. I'm a grafted SOS for that first and authority. And it's, what Patrick and Graham are doing, other vendors are doing, and others are going to do their next step. And it's going to be done at a bespoke level. So, but this goes against, I think, Charlie, what you guys are trying to do at DC, in discussions around trying to build that uniform process across the ecosystem. If a vendor can come to Fairfax County and you want a certain tool in a certain direction, and so the systems engineer will just be able to speak into their toolbox, build that within 90 minutes for your agency, and then go down the road to Prince George's County and do the same thing, so it's tailored at bespoke level. That's going to move away from uniform discussion that we talked about. And this is a challenge. And this is going to be one, I think, of the hardest things as an ecosystem, as a public safety ecosystem, that the vendor community, the standard bodies, the association world, the unions, and quite frankly, the men and women on the front line, if AI is going to change it, and how it's going to have an impact for the 25-year-old coming through, and then for the folks who are at the tail end of their careers. And how we respond to this is going to dictate the next 20, 30 years of public safety. And so it's more of a statement rather than anything else. Continuing to have this discussion, I think the technology forums, government, law enforcement, fire side are really crucial. But the leadership of public safety to push down onto the vendor ecosystem is going to be fundamental to the success of what AI does inside of public safety. and it's gonna, as I say, it's here, and we are just months away from complete revolution. You've seen that already happen with NPU.
And I just want to add to that. He's 100% right. Yesterday, I made an app to test Epic Blue. It's going to help us make it more accurate. 2 hours with AI. You made a test app literally in 2 hours that I'm running on my phone right now. One thing that you guys, I think you need to do is mandate every RFP you put out. It has to have an interoperability piece in it where the vendors are forced to have an open API. If we have a REST API, we'll work with anyone, everyone. Actually, I was just talking with first two back there. They're literally trying to build what we built. I just said, what do you want to do? Because there's going to be times where you have a customer and we have a customer that are going to mutual aid. We have to share data together. I think we're the weirdos in the room of the company because we're the only ones that think like that. Everyone is protect your garden. But you guys have to be the ones to say, is RFP, you have to be able to work with others through an API. The data standards have to be. I said this in California, and I'm saying this here. Everyone needs to do it, but it has to come from you.
Okay, so that brings us to kind of our wrap-up question, which I think was 2 points were great. What are our next steps? Right, so it's a collective group. I think it's such a tremendous amount of brain power here. We've looked around the room in terms of who you're sitting next to. It's pretty remarkable. So what do we do next? Because what are the thoughts in terms of what we need to do moving forward?
So this is just building on what I said earlier, but I think next steps, it'd be great if we could speak with one voice, but I don't see that happening anytime soon. I'm a realist, and even if it's a bit of a fantasy, what I do see happening is when Fairfax or Arlington comes up with a vendor with that widget, they call me, or they call Prince William, and start at that level. And to your point, it's not going to help us regional, but we got to start somewhere.
Thanks. Any other thoughts or anybody have opinions on what the next steps may be? The one voice was great, or at least as near to a voice as we can. I think there is a point about procurement in there and how we can ensure our vendors can work together. Further ideas? Drew, please.
I think I'm the one voice next. I've said this before. It's important
to speak as one voice, but how, right? Define the requirements.
Define the requirements and tell the vendors, not exactly what you need, but what's good enough, right? And define the requirements so you inform any sort of policymakers that are outside of this world that are writing policy, whether it's regulators, whether it's legislators, whether it's funding. And that one voice can be incredibly powerful, both controlling message to what the vendors build and ensuring the policy is create an environment where that innovation can have advantage values. And it happens at the procurement level, doesn't it? Right? That's where public safety is always going to be controlled. It doesn't matter what tool the vendor builds. If it doesn't fit inside the procurement ecosystem that folks can purchase off, it's completely useless. It's just a widget, right? And so the regionalization model, I agree with you. Working together as regions is a very, very powerful tool. And I'm seeing a lot of that across the country. I'm all over the place all the time. And DC is very, very effective. With NCR, it's a very, very effective tool base for that. So I think ensuring that there is a strong procurement process that builds flexibility into the agency and the regional level, I think is a very, very powerful.
Yeah, I'd just like to add to that. So case in point, S&T's been working with all the manufacturers who build NG911 equipment. We're actually building the first NG911 testing laboratory to make sure products are interoperable and standards compliant. And so we're actually working with Fairfax County to take the words of how you do procurement and the requirements that they go through a testing program. And so that has been really great. And what we've heard is nothing but positive comments from other jurisdictions around the nation. So the point being, lessons learned, share those. Put those out there, and if you have a requirement for interoperability, put that in your acquisitions and promote that to your colleagues and friends, because I think that's the only way around this. Because we keep developing the same thing, we keep we keep inventing the same thing over and over again, we keep spending things, and then we try to cobble everything together with Band-Aid and baling wire, which is not the right way to go. So please do share, put it in the acquisitions. I think from a policy standpoint, requirement for interoperability, standards compliance, and oh, by the way, standards compliance helps you with one other way. If you build to a standard, you're not getting vendor lock-in, and you're gonna get a better market competition. You will get truly the best of the breed, and no vendor's gonna be sitting on their laurels. They're gonna have to keep up and keep delivering.
So, please add real big, when we're running out of time. To the gentleman's point back here, and Walt, to your point, we're probably not going to grant everything, but I want to find responders. To me, that means X, Y, Z. Work your way down from the most general that I think we all agree on. People come home safe. Go as specific as we can before the disagreement. Stop there. And then that becomes the policy position, right? And that can be IAFC, IACP, Apple, NETA, NASMA, SAFEPON, MISRA. We can at least articulate that. Maybe we are, but I don't think we are. If we just did that, everything aligns from there.
Start with the low-hanging fruit.
Easy way.
Okay, so other closing thoughts or comments before we start our wrap-up? Right, well, seeing here you're done. I see you now. See you in the back corner. Okay, so first and foremost, thanks to our panelists. Appreciate the time. So I started today talking about the Lister Cold Storage Fire. And one of the things I didn't mention was that one of the firefighters who passed their partner, his name is Paul Bellerton. Paul Bellerton has 6 cells, so we're doing fire barn. One of his sons, Steven's a pretty good friend of mine. We're colleagues at the Fire Academy. And I think for this room, we have an obligation to Steve and others like him, right? Because there's many, many other legacy firefighters who lost their fathers or mothers, or the case may be, in the line of duty. And we have to, we're doing everything we can to make their career safer, right? So Chief Paul has mentioned our next generation. I'd like to think that my sons and daughter, whether they join the fire service or law enforcement, another public safety agency, know that rooms of people like this did everything they possibly could to get them home safe at night. And I think to build on that too, imagine looking Steve Brotherton in the face, knowing that we had solutions, and then take and get the job that, right? He should have. He suffered the same fate as a father. So I think that just kind of puts a finer point to why this is so critical. So thank you again to all of you for spending your day with us. Again, this is super critical. In addition to that, thank you to the manufacturers and the vendors, DHS, S&T, other regulators, the First Net Authority, and the list goes on and on and on, our partners in labor, that put this as an important point in public safety, right? I'm always impressed with people that do work on our behalf for us so they don't get, right? So you realize how important it is and appreciate your time. And last but not least, well, this I should say, is thanks to the Fairfax Fire Rescue for Express today. It's exceptional day.